just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Tabea from Manchester Confucius Institute, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all to join us for a panel discussion tonight with 3 of our advanced Chinese learners who have taken out some time to chat about their personal journeys, about their tips about motivation, motivating yourself when you're learning a language, and also the most important thing, how it enhances your city, how they might you know, have developed some career prospects of adding that language to your skill set. So shortly I'll be handing over to Lucy Yang, who's our senior language tutor, who will be hosting this session this evening, and I'll be taking myself off. If you've got any problems, any issues, you can just put that in the chat and I'll respond to that. The same goes with any questions. So the way we are running the discussion, we are going to open up, we're going to start with some questions to the panelists for about 40-45 minutes or so, and then have a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, put them in the chat as we go along, and then hopefully we'll get to answer them at the end. We've prepared a little poll to get an insight of our audience, to find out a little bit more about you. So before I hand over to Lucy, I thought I'm just going to launch the poll and invite you to click what's applicable. Can you see this now? So we've prepared 4 questions there. I hope you can see them all. Okay, I was wondering whether to include any other languages, but it was good that I did, because quite a few of you are learning not only Chinese. You clearly like a challenge. You'd like to learn more than one. Fantastic. I think everybody's probably filled it out now, so I'm just going to end it and share the results so you can see. And am I okay, Lucy, to hand over to you now?
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you very much, Tabea. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Thank you for attending this panel discussion held by Confucius Institute at the University of Manchester. My name is Lucy Yang, and I'm the senior language tutor and the teaching coordinator at the Confucius Institute. It's my honor to host the panel discussion tonight. So we will talk about the Mandarin learning journey of our 3 excellent Chinese learners and their successful career development and their inspiration to learn this language and lead to the success. So hopefully you can take away some Mandarin learning tips with you tonight, and also maybe some job hunting tips from them. Let's welcome our 3 speakers, Zhang, Thomas, and Joe. Before they start to introduce themselves, I would like to say something about them. So I have been teaching Mandarin at the Confucius Institute for many, many years now, and the 3 of them used to be my Chinese students. I still remember Thomas, because Thomas was one of my first English students when I first arrived to the UK 11 years ago, and in the Confucius Institute summer intensive course. At that time, he didn't know any Chinese at all, and he's a total beginner. And I was very impressed that he told me that his ultimate dream of learning Chinese, the ultimate goal, is to be able to read the 4 Chinese classic novels in Chinese. So that I found it's very inspiring and interesting, because that's really like this thick per novel, and including, if you know some of the novels, so it's including the Dream in the Red Chamber, The Journey to the West, and 108 Shuihu Heroes, and also 3 Kingdoms story. So that's really impressed me a lot. And now I believe he already can be able to read the novel now, because he have been spending a lot of time learning Chinese. Now he's like the most advanced level, and he have been teaching English in a university in Beijing as well for many years, and have been awarded as the excellent, outstanding English teacher many times. And he told me that his secret of teaching English well is to stealing the teaching tips from me on our Confucius Institute. And Yang is a very successful entrepreneur, and I found he's a very talented language learner, because he only started to learn Chinese 3 years ago, and now advanced HSK 6 level, and he mainly studied one-to-one with us. I remember when I tried to communicate with his one-to-one teacher, one of our volunteer teachers, and he said he skipped HSK 4 level and from HSK 3 and jumped to HSK 5 and 6. Well, I found it very surprised, and that can show how talented he is, and also he must spend a lot of time by himself in independent learning. And Joe, last but not least, Joe graduated from Chinese Studies at the University of Manchester. So, and now he's a project manager at the University of Manchester. So I think his successful experience can inspire us and inspire Chinese learners, especially the students who majored in Chinese studies, like learn Chinese as a degree and are trying to find a job. Okay, so now I would like them to introduce themselves a little bit, and then I'm going to ask them the first question. So everyone, could you please introduce and also maybe show off a little bit of your Chinese? Start from Yang, maybe.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I am really not sure. I mean, following what Lucy said, I was always looking behind me if there's another Yan. This seems shocking, you know, successful entrepreneurs, advanced students. Didn't know this guy, but anyway, thank you. So yes, I've been, I mean, unlike my other colleagues, I'm a techie, so I've been doing programming and technology all my life, last 25 years, more than I'm even ready to admit. And I think the interest, I suppose, in learning Mandarin, it was a bit of a challenge. I thought one summer, how about trying to pick up another language? And then being the nerd that I am, I thought, okay, let's Google for the most difficult languages. Guess what comes up? Chinese and Mandarin. And then it was a simple sort of effort versus benefit analysis, 1.5 billion people versus, well, I don't know how many Japanese people there are, but fewer. So I thought, okay, let's try it. So I ended up in a classroom in a Confucius Institute, and you know, together with 20 other beginners, and had no idea what to expect. And it turned out to be a lot of fun. So there it is.
Yeah, thank you, Yang. And I believe in the brief introduction in the Eventbrite page, people already have read in details like your profile. So yeah, thank you. Would you like to say something in Chinese? Thank you.
就有点尴尬，我都不敢。然后特别是 Thomas 和 Joe 在，然后他们的水平太高了。
你也很好 Yeah. What fascinated me is that John he learned so well and so fast, only 3 years, and from total beginner to advanced level. But he has never been to China yet, right?
True,
hopefully after the pandemic he will be able to do that. But he is dealing with some Chinese customers in his company, I believe, and later he will talk about more about share his experience and also how to deal with Chinese people in business again. Okay, thank you very much. And now Thomas, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Tom. It's been, like you say, over 10 years I've been learning Chinese now. I had a lot more hair when I started, but I don't blame the Chinese for that, you know, it's probably genetics. Yeah, I guess people have read my biography. I've taught at several universities in China, mostly in English, but sometimes in Chinese too. I've translated a book, which was probably the most high-level Chinese thing I've done. That was for some monks at the Longquan Temple in Beijing. I've done some other translation work for some surrealist artists in France as well. Yeah, you know, I've used my Chinese to do a lot of things, and some of those are related to my career, you know. 如果你要让我说中文的话，还是有一点尴尬。这2年我一直在欧洲，所以我熬了2年之后，就可能没有之前那么好，我的水平可能退步了。但是我准备了一句话，就是大学这个书英文名字叫做 The Great Learning. And this is a very classic Chinese book. 里面有一句话：知之而后能定，定而后能静，静而后能安，安而后能虑，虑而后能得。And so this sentence is like once you have some understanding, you can set your intention. Once you set your intention, you can be calm. Once you're calm, you can really be at peace. Once you're at peace, you can think, or you can consider. And when you can truly consider, then you can get what you want. So I think this is hopefully most of the people in here will be of a level they can understand this, even though it's one of those Chinese books that's a little bit scary. Hopefully I'll put the sentence, the Chinese, in the text box if people want to have a look. But yeah, the main thing I'm doing at the moment is I'm planning hopefully to do a PhD in Chinese, which even saying it out loud scares me a little bit, you know, but in philosophy, right? Chinese philosophy, focusing on maybe Mo Zongsan, who's a 20th century Chinese philosopher. But we'll see. We'll see. I've got to make sure I get the right grades in my master's degree first, you know, my second master's degree. But anyway, that's a little bit about me, you know.
Thank you, Thomas. Actually, his Chinese name is Zhuge Liang. In the first Zhuge Liang, and now changed to Zhuge Yun. Do you know? If you know Zhuge Liang, you know that is a famous character in the Three Kingdoms story, right? So that's why I never get used to call his Chinese English name. I always call him Zhuge Liang. So yeah, he's very interested in philosophy, and that's his bachelor and master degree major. So I'm sure later, if we have chance, he can share about his depth knowledge about his understanding about the philosophy in the East, and also the difference between the East and Western philosophy. 谢谢诸葛亮, thank you. And last but not least, Joe, and his Chinese name is Yun Hao. And yeah, now your turn, Yun Hao.
Hi everybody. Yeah, thanks Lucy for the kind of introduction. I think it's probably a glowing or sort of a slightly exaggerated introduction to me. I'd say I'm quite a normal guy. In terms of Chinese, I'd really say that I'm somebody who sort of almost like an accidental Chinese learner. So that might sound strange, as I was introduced to someone who did Chinese at university. But very similar to Jan, actually, similar in one respect. I was finished my A-levels. I wanted to do business at university, and I wanted something to kind of set myself apart. So this was back in 2007. I applied for Japanese and business at 3 universities and Chinese and business at 3 universities. And I'm slightly ashamed to admit that at that time, China's economic growth was going wild. And I thought, this is a ticket to lots of money. So that was my motivation to study Chinese. All these years later, it's been kind of a fantastic journey. And the interesting thing, I suppose, which I'll probably touch on later in some of the questions, is that my initial motivation was all about sort of money and career, but the actual journey of studying Chinese itself is incredibly rewarding. So I would say to anyone, no matter how difficult you find it, just stick with it, because I'm sure Thomas and Yen would testify that the rewards come later on, whether that's financially or just through the satisfaction of mastering the language. 要我说中文的话，其实我不知道我该说什么，就是我just说一句话，就是中国和学习汉语对我的生活和职业有很大的影响。
好的，谢谢云浩，谢谢 Joe. Thank you very much, Joe. I think you're very how to say modest because that's something you learn from the Chinese culture. Actually, I think you're really a role model for Chinese studies students because he just graduated several years ago, right? So like 2 years ago. And now he's a manager in University of Manchester, which is quite rare, you know. I know some graduates still struggling to find a job, some like, especially during the pandemic time. But now Joe is, I think he worked very hard, and also I'm sure later he can share us some wonderful tips about job hunting. Okay, so the first questions I would like to ask, I think some of you already mentioned, like, why did you learn Chinese? Is any, I would like you to share like any moments, vivid moments you can remember that, or something like your personal like story, that some moments that just touch you and made you fall in love with Chinese language or Chinese culture. And at that moment, and then made you have an idea, why not to try Chinese? I'm sure if you have this kind of moments, whether it's video games or cartoon or your like holiday in China, or so, anyone?
I'm happy to start. So yeah, I mean, I just sort of came clean and said that I thought learning Mandarin would be a ticket to a big salary. And it definitely will be for some people. But yeah, what I was going to say is Thomas, Yen, myself, Lucy, we actually kind of met last week, and we ended up having a big discussion, and that we got told off almost, because that's what we're here to do now. But one of the things that came up there was kind of when throughout the learning process of Chinese, even when you can just speak a tiny little bit of Chinese people, it's a very nice thing. They'll say, wow, Chinese is amazing. But that, and after that happens kind of 25 times, and not to be sort of sound nasty, but you start to think, is my Chinese amazing or not? But the key thing for me is that, the key point I'm trying to make is that I think Chinese people really sort of welcome foreigners learning their language, and to me that's kind of one of the biggest impressions that the whole process of learning the language had on me. So aside from the kind of motivations, whatever you're doing with your language learning, make sure you interact with Chinese people and go beyond the sort of language partner. If you have a language partner, great, but try to befriend them, because you get a lot more out of a sort of natural friendship than you do compared to a sort of transaction for sharing language learning English for Chinese. But that would be my sort of opening remarks on that question.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I do agree that find a language partner is really helpful. Jan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think so. No, I totally agree with Joe.
How did you fall in love with this language? I heard you said you want to challenge the most challenging, most difficult languages in the world, and then you choose Chinese. Is that true?
Actually, no. To a degree, I think the search came. Well, I'm originally Czech, so I had to go through the pain of learning English, and then I thought, okay, let's see if I can learn another language. I did French when I was younger, and other bits of other languages. And then here I was in the UK 20 years later, and I thought, okay, how about Chinese then? Just something different. And I think the first point of pleasure was as you watch these videos, and all of a sudden it goes from this crazy, completely alien language to, hang on, they say things sort of the way we do. It's not so bad. I mean, the words sound different, obviously, but it's kind of the same thing. So that was the first point of, oh yeah, no, this can actually be done. And then I think Joe was pointing that out. It's the interaction with people and thinking about me, the Czech me. If any one of you were to say anything in Czech, I'd be so pleased. It's unusual, right? And I'd encourage you to keep trying. No, do it. And yes, it's a horribly hard language, but keep at it. I think the attitude from Chinese speakers is actually exactly the same. You see, first of all, you get the, oh, your Chinese is so good, when quite patently it isn't. And then you have to go through the phase of everyone telling you Chinese is so good until they stop telling you it's so good and they just talk at you. I think that's actually where you want to be.
Yes. Thank you, Jan. Yeah, I guess if you think learning a language is like hiking, then I'm sure now you are on the top, all of you three on the top. But even if you only started in the foot of the mountain, even if you just can say something like, hello, how are you? And then when Chinese people heard it, they will still praise you. Wow, how good is your Chinese? Oh, very good. Yeah, I think because in the past, it's really rare for someone in the Western countries to speak Mandarin. But now I believe more and more, we have more and more students and learners in the UK, and I believe all over the world, which is a good sign, good thing yet. And Thomas, do you want to add anything? I know you fall in love with China and Chinese culture because you have read the Three Kingdom stories, or is that a video game? Three Kingdom stories.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a mixture. It was I did some martial arts when I was younger.
Oh.
Then when I was a teenager, I started getting interested in Chan or Zen Buddhism, which is of course Chinese, and and then reading the history of China through a video game dialogue. And so then when it came time to choose a language, you're like, well, I like this and I like this and I like that, so I'll give it a go. I'll see how it goes. And I think later on, it was really Chinese poetry that's the real pinnacle of Chinese language, in my opinion. If people are looking for something to love, then I would point you towards especially the Tang Dynasty poets, and the Song Dynasty too. Those two eras are like,
Yeah, that's beautiful, but that's only for advanced learners, I believe, because that's a lot of like Asian Chinese language is in the mix.
So there are some poems if people are interested, that I can share some poems that even HSK4 say it would be okay, I think. But yeah, some of them are very difficult, some of them are very hard.
Thank you. So now, can you share any tips, like how to help us to learn a foreign language well? Maybe how to learn Mandarin well, or maybe this experience can be learning other foreign languages. And also, I believe now you are advanced learners, but you must have been through some, not only joy, but also pain, from the beginners to the advanced learners, advanced level. So how did you, if you look back, how did you, see this journey, like the Chinese learning journey? Have you ever think of giving up at some point, like when you find out, oh, so difficult, so hard, or I'm too busy, why bother learning this language, or something like that? So yeah, some tips for Mandarin learners or foreign language learners. And if you feel it is a difficult language, then what is your motivation, or what is your phase to keeping it up and never give up? Maybe Joe, do you want to say?
Yeah, sure. So to just address one of the things you mentioned there, so the degree course I did, I did Mandarin and business management. But yeah, the Mandarin side of that was in the Chinese department of the University of Manchester. I hadn't, a little bit like the situation Jan is in now, I'd never been to China when I started learning Chinese. I have to say, I'm very impressed. I didn't know you'd not been to China, Jan, so good on you. But yeah, I hadn't been to China, and if I'm honest, I spent 18 months of the first 2 years prior to when I would spend a year abroad in China doing the language, and I wouldn't say I enjoyed it very much. I wasn't a natural language student, didn't do a language to A level, and definitely considered quitting on more than one occasion. The thing that I really focused on, which I think is probably not necessarily everyone's go-to sort of element of languages, is writing, because I don't know if I'm presuming everybody on the call is based in the UK, so we're not in a predominantly Chinese speaking country, so you don't get loads and loads of opportunity to be immersed in a Chinese speaking environment, but you can immerse yourself in books, in literature, as Thomas has sort of referenced, such as poetry. You can read the news in Chinese, but that was a huge thing for me. So without kind of going on too much, once I got to China, or once I was fortunate enough to go to China, that investment in learning to read especially pays off kind of, I don't know how many fold. It helps you, once you do get a Chinese speaking environment, the investment that you've done in the writing and reading just helps you accelerate or improve your level very quickly.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I agree, because I think reading is really, really important. And not only read the textbook that you are having in your class, but also some extra reading materials, including like some news articles or HSK graded reading material or some online resources. So I believe Yum have the same suggestions, right? And
Yeah.
you also emphasize reading, right? Yeah. Any
Exactly
other
the same
to share?
suggestions. Find something that you enjoy, something that you do. For me, obviously, it's technology and technology news. So just, when I would look at tech news in Czech and in English, I'll read the same, it's the same news. It's a small world. I'll read the same news in Mandarin, and yeah, always read, find something interesting. I have tons of, I like sci-fi, so I have sci-fi books, loads of sci-fi books. And you could argue that the stories are the same. Of course, they're the same. By the time you've seen the 10th laser, it's the same. It's the same laser. Star Wars Day is the Star Wars Day. We had that yesterday. But it's fun, right? And it makes you read, and it gives you this warm and fuzzy feeling, because you read this page and you go, yeah, no, this is great. I understood it. This is fantastic. But at the same time, it gives you, so, I also like to play games, and, the frustration where you see a dialogue and it says, okay, we must now go quickly into our spaceship, plant the next signal and go to, and there it is. You don't know what that word is. it's so frustrating. It's so annoying, but at the same time, something that really makes you go, okay, fine. Next time I'll know. Take a picture of this and tomorrow I'll know what it is. So yeah, it has to be fun. Like ultimately it has to be fun. It has to connect. Read more, listen more. It's free. There is like YouTube, Spotify. There's everything. So honestly, okay, fine, you will not be immersed in the sense of you have to deal with your electricity bill in Chinese. Sure, but you can deal with everything else in Chinese.
Yeah, thank you, Yan. I think that's a good idea. You can play video games in Chinese. You can even set your mobile phone, the settings language in Chinese. I believe that's a very good way to learn. And
don't forget how to reset your phone if you do that.
I agree that find some topic that you're really interested in, like maybe related to your career. For example, if your major is a computer science, then you find the computer science like news articles read in Chinese, and or if you like computer games, just play games in Chinese, so that you feel like you have the motivation to learn more, and you don't feel it's a really a painful process, and instead you might feel it's fun, and also efficient. Thank you. So Thomas.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I mean, this probably seems like stating the obvious, but I was just thinking while Yen was speaking. But I think just an observation, when you learn languages, and I only speak English and Chinese, so I'm certainly no expert, but everybody's really keen to be able to speak. But I think it's especially at the beginning, it's the input that's so much that gets you the gains. It doesn't matter. Absolutely. Like your speaking will come on leaps and bounds and well, the obvious thing is there's no point being able to say a few things if you can't understand what's being said back to you. So
precisely, someone's going to reply. Yes.
Sorry to interject, Thomas, but just thought it's worth saying.
Yeah, input is really important. Unless you have a lot of input, and then you can have quality output. Yeah, for sure. And also for Chinese, you need to recognize the characters as well when you read. So that's a good way to get familiar with the characters, even if you don't have to really handwrite the characters, but you still need to recognize them. Then you can type in pinyin. Yeah. And Thomas, any tips for learning Chinese? And by the way, Thomas is he has a lot of experience teaching in China, and also has been living in China for how many years now? Like 8 years, I believe.
Yeah, it was
8 to 9 years already. So he has been in Beijing, in Shanxi, but mainly in Beijing, and he taught English in Beijing Language and Culture University, which is a really famous university in China. Thomas?
So again, I'll just go through my study plan quickly, or at least not my study plan right now, but generally what I have, which is to have daily goals, medium-term goals, and then longer-term goals. So a typical study plan, especially if you're talking about, let's say, HSK 4-5 level, which seems to be the standard for the people in this group, that you would have a certain amount of new words a day, and you'd have your reviewing flashcard software, Pleco, Memrise, which one you like, So you have your 3 words a day, usually they'd be HSK vocabulary, right? So you do 3 new words, make sure you memorize them properly. And then hopefully you'll be able to have a weekly theme or weekly thing that you want to be able to do that week. Maybe master a piece of grammar for your language partner, or you want to buy something. Often I would use that as an incentive. So maybe buy a computer. And if I want to buy a computer, that's a lot of new words that I need to learn, And then at the end of the week, you go and buy the computer, you use the language. And then having medium-term goals, which usually for me is a HSK exam or some form of quite difficult things that you can do. You can prepare over, say, 6 months. And then finally, long-term goals. My first long-term goal was to have a friend that couldn't speak English. And that took years, that took years to reach that goal. And as Lucy said, being able to read the classics was the next one. And now being able to read the classics without tearing out what little hair I have left is the new goal, you know. being able to do it leisurely, you know, in a leisurely fashion, rather than with a lot of effort. So that would be my thing, to really be clear about your study plan and recognize that sometimes it is a grind in those individual moments, but it's going through that daily study plan, having those weekly goals. And it doesn't take that long to do either. Like, it's one of those things, you can finish this lesson, do your study plan in like 10 minutes. If you really want to, and having that structure, then you either do it or you don't, you know. And if you don't do it, well, then you have to get back on the horse. But that's a kind of more general theory of motivation. I'm not a psychologist, you know. But that would be my general, that's been my general approach, and it's been quite successful. Overall, I would say, just really breaking it down into a study plan that you can commit to. And again, of course, everything that Joe and Jan said, I completely agree with. We're very simple creatures, really. If you enjoy it, you'll do it. If you hate it, you probably won't. So if you can, as much as you can, make it enjoyable, but also accept that there's going to be times when you just have to put your nose down and really just do it, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I believe making a detailed plan, and long-term, mid-term, short-term, is not only the key to success of Mandarin learning, but also for any other things in the world, like anything like your career or your learning another language, not only Chinese. You all need to make a detailed plan, like maybe allocate the daily plan, like every morning you made a plan and say, I need to, for example, I need to learn this 20 words today, and tomorrow I need to learn another 20 words, like this. Thank you. Very useful tips for learning a language. And the next question is, so now you're be able to speak in Chinese and communicate with Chinese people. And also, I believe you now get a better understanding of the Chinese people's culture and also their mindset, or maybe their customs, Chinese people's customs in business, also in the daily life. So how that help you to improve your career development, how you lead, and how learning Mandarin or learning Mandarin Chinese culture lead you to your success now. So any tips to share to Mandarin learners or foreign language learners? So like how they can find a job, how they use the language skills to improve their career. Jan?
Okay, well, it's incredibly helpful. Any new language that you know will give you better understanding of the people who speak it. And I don't mean just the spoken and written and read things. I mean, a lot of the times it's the things that they don't say, or it's the typical English, oh, this is interesting. And we don't mean interesting at all, really don't. It means it's a terrible idea. But every culture has these shortcuts where you don't want to say to someone, you want to be polite, you want to be nice. I think this is common throughout. And just different languages, different cultures encode it differently. Czechs do it differently. If you ask a Czech person, how are you? They'll say terrible. The immediate answer is terrible. Everything is horrible. And then you sort of poke it a little bit more, and eventually you get to, well, actually, it's not so bad, and things are going well. You ask an English person how they are, or American person how they are, they're fantastic. Everything is wonderful. And then you poke a little bit, and then you find out, well, actually, it's kind of okay. So I think that these little nuances will help you better understand, even if we all use English or whatever language it is, people will still sort of translate, maybe unknowingly, they'll fall into the patterns of thinking, patterns of communication. And so if you're aware of that, it's so much easier to communicate with your colleagues, with your customers, right? Especially if you're making, doing thinking where you have to coordinate with many teams, you really have to understand what they're saying. And if you can do that through learning a language, and obviously learning language will not force you, it will just sort of, through osmosis, you'll suck up some of the culture. You'll watch videos and, you know, you'll first look at Chinese memes and you think, well, what is this? And then a couple of years later you go, oh yeah, haha, this is funny. So slowly and slowly you'll be able to communicate more efficiently. These little barriers will go away. And I think you'll find it super useful if you have to deal with teams that are across the world. Okay, we're talking about Chinese, so in China or Chinese speaking part of the world, but you know, this applies to any language.
Yeah, so maybe later you can give us some examples, like especially maybe it's just tiny examples, like of specific things, how you feel, well, Chinese people's silence actually means something else, or something like that. Yeah. Joe, how about you? Any suggestions?
Sorry, I'm just trying to refresh myself on the question, because I think there's quite a few angles to it. But
you can talk about, you said you want to talk about guanxi.
Yeah, I mean, so that was on my mind.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things. One of them is a really small thing. The second one is guanxi.
Yeah.
The really small thing is whatever level your Chinese is. I mean, I'm totally stating the obvious, but if you have it on your CV, then Thomas, I'm sure out of us three, Yen probably as well, can testify to this, but be prepared to use it at an interview. So, for example, my role at Manchester, which I began 3 years ago, plus kind of 2-3 previous jobs I've done, they've all inevitably put me on the spot and said, either asked me some questions in Chinese at the interview. I even had one where it was for a company that imports a lot of things from China, and in the interview I had to get on the phone to their sort of China office and make sure that I'm not embellishing the CV. So make sure you do that. That's a simple thing. But then in terms of guanxi, so connections, it certainly when I studied Chinese at Manchester and throughout the whole time I've kind of had interaction with like studying language or Chinese people, guanxi is mentioned over and over and over and over, and it's not a load of noise. It's a real thing. Chinese people, in my experience, are exceptionally good at sort of business. If they say they're going to do something, they usually do it. And just a little example. I work at the University of Manchester now, but well, I made a connection with a girl called Melody when I was living back in my hometown, Nottingham. She helped me actually prepare for my interview to get this job that I do at the University of Manchester. She helped me produce a bit of a one-pager in case I was asked to introduce myself in Chinese and justify why I want the job role. So that was how I met her. And then over the last kind of few years with the pandemic, I've ended up having this, I hope this doesn't go beyond this meeting actually, but I'll just spit it out. I've ended up having this little side job, which is just tutoring. I just tutor English, but this all came about from maintaining connection with her. I ended up tutoring one student. So I should have said this friend of mine runs a company that in the long term hopes to arrange places in English school for Chinese pupils. And as part of that, they also offer a tutoring service. But all I did was get introduced to one student, and then that snowballed. At one stage, I had about 6 students, and all of that is just through connections. That's just a small example. And tutoring isn't rocket science or anything particularly entrepreneurial, but it's a good example of how guanxi just leads one thing to another. So those would be my 2 tips.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yes. So in case you don't know what is guanxi, guanxi is a Chinese word and it means links, connections. So you know the difference about Chinese and English culture. One of the difference is about like the links, the connections, maybe in the Western countries. So for example, if I have 3 friends, but they're never gonna meet unless it's in a wedding or funeral, right? So like birthday and hang out, and English people or Western people never introduce 3 of them to meet, become friends. But in China, that's opposite. If you have 10 friends, normally Chinese people are happy to introduce the 10 friends to meet together. And then all the 10 friends became good friends with each other. So the same in the business settings. I suppose that the Joe would like to share with us, like especially in job hunting or in business occasions. If you have links, and your links will introduce their links, and then you have a lot of like good connections and links, and this gonna help you a lot. Yeah, and Thomas.
Yeah, my observation about success with careers and Chinese is, what do you pair it with? At the end of the day, if you speak Chinese well, it'll get you a lot of compliments. You know, people will say, and if you speak Chinese not very well, it'll get you a lot of compliments. But right, the people that I know that have made money using their Chinese abilities, they always pair it with, like in Jan's case, tech, in Joe's case, business, in my case, philosophy, but I've also known people that do it with law, and even education as well. People that have done PhDs in education with a China focus, and then have the language skills, and then they work on cross-country curriculum development and things like that. But it's always, I know someone at the moment that's doing it with music. So they're using Chinese language ability, and they're studying traditional Chinese folk music. Yeah. So what does it go with? I've never known anyone that, well, apart from maybe some like Dashan, there's a few like celebrities, right, in China that literally just go on stage, speak Chinese, and then people just pay them to do that. But they're definitely the massive minority. So that would be what I would say is, what does it go with? How do you pair it with something? And then once you've got the answer to that, then you, like Joe says, you need to meet people in that area, and you need to be able to have, again, it is connections. Sometimes you'll get messages on LinkedIn, you know, people will contact you. But a lot of the time, Chinese people are much more comfortable working with people that they know, you know, people that they know. So you have to get to know them, you know.
I totally agree, Thomas. It's, you know, take it to an English setting. Imagine that you are looking for a project manager, an engineer, a philosopher, and someone turns up and says, "Hi, I can speak English." They say, "Okay, good. And so does everyone else here. Now, do you know the thing that we're looking for?" That's the key, right? It doesn't matter what it is. I speak from the tech environment, so if you want to be a software engineer, you have to program. If it just so happens that you can use Chinese, brilliant. But even in that case, half of your conversations will be in English because programming. But you have to know, I think, okay, you don't have to know. I think the careers that the 4 of us have landed in, you just have to know something else. You can probably get away with learning just the language for the language if you want to be purely sort of researching a language, which I think would be a lot of fun too, but as it happens, I ended up in tech.
Yeah, great. So learning a language can be something to add up on your CV, but you still need to have your subject, your major, right? So like, for example, technology or philosophy or business management. Yeah, but surely if you know something the others don't know, for example, a foreign language, especially Mandarin, then that can make you stand out, and that can make you special and open up another door. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, Lucy, there are you know, a couple of jobs I've got them purely because I speak Chinese. That, I suppose that they are sort of few and far between. Like, I mean, just really quickly, you know, I know this is not necessarily many people's long-term goal, but I worked in Selfridges and Burberry in Manchester. I'm not interested in fashion retail at all. This was during my student days, but they gave you the jobs because you could speak Chinese, and 80% of the clientele are Chinese, roughly. And then my role within the university initially was to try and build links between Chinese industry and the University of Manchester. So basically get research investment from Chinese companies to the University of Manchester. So there are roles out there that you can get purely because you speak Chinese, because they're, in those two examples, there'll be people who sort of more specialized in the nitty-gritty of those two jobs, but because I had the China angle, you get them. But I'm not contradicting everything that's just been said. I'm just saying there are those opportunities too, but you do have to comb quite a few job websites to find them, would be my experience.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So now we have 10 minutes, so I believe it's our Q&A session. Because according to the result of the research, like Paul, I know most of you are Mandarin learners, but some of you still learning another foreign language, and the levels, it varies. So, and if you have any specific questions regarding Mandarin learning, foreign language learning, or job hunting, or anything about China, Chinese culture, or how to find a job in China, or how to find a job in the UK, or any other questions, please let us know by either type in the chat box so I can read out your questions, or you, if you want to pull up your hand, raise your hand and just ask and turn on your camera. So either way you prefer. Okay, so any questions?
We do have the two, don't we? And this is not for me to answer.
There's already two in the chat, Lucy.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for typing in the chat. Oh, someone already raised a hand. Okay, so who, sorry, I can't see who is that, but someone raised, oh yeah, hi Josie, right? Yeah, so would you like to ask some questions? So
hello everyone, I'm from India. 我是退休校长 I'm a retired school principal. 我学习韩语从2018 since 2018. 现在我学习HSA 5 从CI Confucius Institute, University of Mumbai.
Ah,
Hey.
right.
Okay.
You have learning for 2 years and now you are advanced on the advanced level. Yeah. So what is the question?
I would like to become a teacher of Mandarin. 我想要成为一名中文老师。
中文老师，很好。Thank you. So your question is how to become a Chinese teacher? Is that in your country or in
India?
In England, yeah.
In India.
In India, yeah. Any ideas? I believe for teaching, Thomas, he is teaching.
He's the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems we've got a teaching question, a master's question, and then another question directed at me. Yeah, it's a little bit. In terms of being a teacher, I would say that the easiest way. So there's these they call them 对外汉语 courses. And the Confucius Institute pushed them quite a lot. I know the one in Manchester provides scholarships for people that want to be Chinese teachers. Unfortunately, some of those run age limits, which usually around 30 to 35. And I apologize if my assumption is wrong, but I think it might be maybe 36 or 37.
Student. I'm already a scholarship student from ECNU Shanghai.
Okay.
Oh, you already been the teacher already.
No,
Oh.
yeah, I'm already a scholarship student from
Oh, that's good. You already got-
ECNU Shanghai.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once you've got that qualification along with the HSK, the real thing is the competition. I know there is a Chinese population in Mumbai. I'm not sure how big it is. So that's the main problem. The people that I know that want to teach Chinese, the main problem they come across is finding the students that would rather learn from a non-native speaker. And my advice for that would be just showing them that all of the problems that they face and they're going to face, the pronunciation problems, the grammar problems, that Chinese teachers sometimes will say, this is easy, that you can guide them through that. So really turn what seems to be a weakness into a strength would be my advice.
Thank you. And we also have some teacher training event twice a year. If you would like to attend the teacher training,
I would like to be invited.
Yeah, then if you just email us and saying you would like to join our CI newsletter, then normally we will release all the events in the future we will have. Yeah.
谢谢.
Thank you. 谢谢. Okay, great. Any other questions? Anyone? I know some of you, I can recognize the name, are learning Chinese, and some of you are Chinese studies students. If you have any questions about learning Chinese or job hunting, yeah, so please type it here or just raise your hand and speak.
I think there was Matt, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, my question is probably not really relevant for the careers question, but it's just purely from curiosity, because this whole Chinese philosophy thing has always been something that's interested me. But at the same time, as a student of Chinese, and admittedly not nearly as advanced as you, Thomas, I just wonder, how did you get your start? How did you begin to go from a student trying to figure out the language to tackling something as challenging as reading Chinese philosophy?
In a lot of very small steps, is I guess is the answer. But if you want my advice, well, if you want to read Chinese philosophy, read it in English would be one. That's one very quick solution to the problem. But I assume that you're talking about reading it in Chinese. There's a website, if you type in C-text into Google, it will come up straight away. And they are a translation project, and they give you the Chinese and the English together. By default, it's the traditional characters. In the top left-hand corner, you can change it to traditional characters. So that's a very good way. Once you've got the English and the Chinese together, and maybe a browser extension as well, that gives you the dictionary definition of any character you don't recognize, then then it's just a matter of patience. Especially if, I don't know what your Chinese level is, but if you're at HSK 5 ish level, then yeah, it's really just a matter of patience at that point. It also depends on what you're reading as well. The language of the Analects is harder than the Mencius, but then the Zhuangzi is harder than the Analects, so I would, if you root around a little bit, yeah, the Mencius is a good text to start with, I think. But yeah, it is very difficult to do that. The other thing I would suggest is looking, if you're really interested, is looking at the Fudan University philosophy course. That they do a master's degree in Chinese philosophy, which combines Chinese and English teaching, that's designed to be a bridge into doing things fully in Chinese. So if you are really serious about it, then that's a way to get some professionals to help you.
That sounds like a retirement plan idea for me, but
The other one is Feng Youlan.
That's the Chinese philosophy.
Yeah, Feng Youlan. He's a philosopher that the Beijing Language and Culture University Press, where I used to work, they do these shuangyu, right? These double Chinese English ones where you get it side by side. And he has an introduction to Chinese philosophy or history of Chinese philosophy that they do in this shuangyu version. That again is quite accessible when you've got the English there to help you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for your question, and thank you, Thomas, for your helpful answer. So maybe now it's 7 o'clock, so I'd like everyone maybe to end up with
there's one more question. I'm really sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no questions
so
anymore.
Maya's question was there right at the start, and I feel like we should really take time to answer that as well. He or she's preparing for a master's degree and learning Chinese by herself. And she's asking whether it would be better to take the master's degree in Chinese to speed up the learning process, or whether she can complete learning it by herself. So I'm not sure if you want to explain that in a bit more detail, Sumaya, about unmuting yourself, or we'll just attempt to answer it.
I'll go really blindly. It depends on what the degree is. I know this is software consultant's answer, isn't it? Well, it depends what you want. And it really does. If it is language, or maybe like Thomas is doing philosophy, something really closely connected to the language, to me, it would seem absurd, it would seem wrong to study Chinese philosophy, history, culture without the language. If it's going to be mathematics, sure, go for mathematics. It doesn't really matter. The numbers and the equations and the tensors will eat you anyhow, and then you can learn Chinese when you're done with it. So it really depends. It really depends what you want to do. Yeah, you need to be able to absorb it. Imagine you go to university lecture. Lucy was mentioning lots of input is important. Absolutely right. Lots of comprehensible input is important. We could be talking at you in Chinese, and if you don't understand what we're saying, it's just noise. You need to be in a position where you understand most of it. You understand the message that we're saying. If you understand the concept that's being taught, so in case when you're studying in Chinese, if you can go to a lecture and understand, you're winning. That's it. If you don't understand what is being said, it has to be a horrible experience. So that's roughly the tip. If your Chinese level is at a point where you can, whatever subject you're studying, if you can right now open YouTube, find a lecture on that topic, and listen to it and understand it, okay, do it. Brilliant. If not, have a think. Maybe this might not be the right approach.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. And any other questions? I don't know if Tabia, you received more questions. I can see it in my chat box.
No, I think we've got actually to all of them. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing your WeChat name as well. Great. Yes, I'm conscious of time, so Lucy, do you want to say anything, or otherwise I would then wrap up the discussion for this evening?
Yeah, before we finish, shall we ask three of the speakers just to share like one of your maybe life motto, maybe just one small sentence, like your life motto which inspired you to work hard and maybe learn language, or just keep you motivated to your success. So maybe you can share with us. Yeah.
I'll go super easy. I will be the least philosophical, most simple. If it's easy, it's really not worth doing.
Oh,
it has
that's
to be
great.
difficult.
Yeah. Thank you, Yam. So that's why you choose Mandarin.
Yeah, and many other things. All these crazy difficult things. I could have had such a simple life.
Yeah. Yeah. But actually, I don't think Mandarin is that difficult if you
It
have
really
the right
isn't.
teacher,
Yeah.
if you have the
Yeah.
right place to
Absolutely
learn.
right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Joe, how about you?
This is not something I was prepared for, Lucy. To be honest, I'm not going to try and come up with anything too creative. My advice would be, whatever your ambitions are with Chinese and your career, just make sure you enjoy it is the main thing.
Yeah.
You know, between the three of us, Thomas, Yen, and myself, we've got 3 people in very different sort of industries or spheres, all who've, I think I speak on behalf of the other 2, who've enjoyed things. If we hadn't enjoyed it, we wouldn't be sitting here at 7:05 on a Thursday night. We'd doing something else. So enjoy yourself, and if it doesn't work out exactly as you plan, then you'll probably find that other doors open for you through the Chinese, if not in other ways. That's all I'd say.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for attending.
Thank you. And Zhuge Liang, Thomas.
Just to have the right kind of balance in the yin and yang, I'll be as philosophical as possible.
Please. Yes.
Just to get the so there's the Chan Buddhist master has a phrase. I've simplified it a little bit, but not too much. I'll put it in the text box. Kan shan shi shan, kan shan bu shi shan, kan shan hai shi shan. And this is his explanation of the stages of Buddhist learning. But I think it also applies to a lot of things, including language learning as well. That you know, that you go through this stage where you things seem quite different, or the language seems quite difficult, but in the end, you come back to a place where things are once again simpler. But again, the whole point of the Chan tradition is not to explain things, is to let people really think about them themselves. So I won't go into too much detail. All right.
Thank you, Thomas. So what you mean is the Mandarin learning journey is like a U shape. So first honeymoon period, everything exciting. Oh, so easy and exciting. And then you went to the bottom where you find is, oh, quite difficult. Oh, so boring. Oh, I want to give up something. But you could, if you manage to insist and keep up and come over all the difficulties now, and then you become on the top again, you find everything is easy, and then you feel more confident, right?
Well, that's the wonderful thing about not saying what you mean, is it makes people think, and you obviously have done a very good job of thinking because I didn't say what I meant, you know. But yeah, that's a very good interpretation. You know? Yeah.
Okay, thank you all of you 3 for your wonderful discussion and sharing. Now I will hand it over to my colleague Tabia. She will wrap it up and then say something in the end. So hope you all enjoyed today's panel, and thank you very much for attending. Yeah, Tabia.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks to our wonderful panel. What a lively discussion and such a great insight, really. I hope you found it as inspiring as I did. I will send an email around with the link to the recording if you want to watch it back. There'll also be a survey, because we're always keen to know where we can improve, or maybe you could tell us other subjects that we can cover in our public talks. That would be fantastic. Yes, that's all from me. Really, I'm conscious of time. It's already 7:10. So thanks again to the panel, and thanks to everyone joining us this evening from Manchester. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.